Displayed on a busy weekday morning, a sudden traffic jam triggers chaos. A businessman named Ken stops his car in the middle of the road because, for some reason, he suddenly loses his vision. Several people approach his car, and one of them, Daniel, offers to take Ken home. However, upon arrival, Daniel steals Ken's car. Ken is left alone, but only for a short while. Daniel returns, pretending to be someone else to help him reach his apartment. This time, Ken is not deceived and drives Daniel away once he feels safe. A few hours later, Ken's wife, Ray, arrives. After learning about his blindness, she immediately takes him to a specialist. Due to the emergency, the doctor allows them to skip the queue. Unfortunately, the medical equipment shows no signs of any illness, leading the doctor to suspect a neurological issue. Ken is referred to a hospital for further examination. Additionally, the doctor, Adam, admits that he has never encountered a case like this before. After Ken and Ray leave, Adam continues examining other patients, including a child named Willie, a woman wearing dark glasses named India, and a man with an eye patch named Dixon. Meanwhile, Daniel drives the stolen car around the city until he is forced to stop. He too has suddenly gone blind. Seeking help, he goes to the police and asks to be taken home, but his ex-wife coldly rejects him. The scene shifts to India. After buying medicine, she heads to a hotel bar to order a drink before meeting a client. Suddenly, she panics as she also loses her sight and desperately pleads for someone to call her parents. That same night, Adam returns home and has dinner with his wife. Everything seems fine as he shares the strange case of one of his patients. However, the next morning, Adam experiences the same sudden blindness. His wife, Isabel, immediately contacts the hospital to warn them about a possible outbreak. The hospital takes the warning seriously, especially after a child was also reported to have lost his sight. As the blindness spreads throughout the city, the government begins implementing precautionary measures. Authorities shut down Adam's clinic, and Adam himself is taken into quarantine. Not wanting to be separated, Isabel pretends to be blind so she can be taken with him. The couple is brought to an empty shelter with no other doctors present. Each ward is equipped with a telephone to contact officers outside, but it can only be used in emergencies. Additionally, each ward must appoint a representative to use the emergency phone. Soon, more people arrive, including Daniel, India, Willie, Ken, Adam, and Isabel. Adam and Isabel agree to keep Isabel's ability to see a secret by pretending she has memorized the layout of the shelter. As people begin settling in, Isabel discreetly assists others, guiding them to the bathroom when needed. When Daniel first leaves his room, he attempts inappropriate actions. India refuses to tolerate it and retaliates, causing him serious injuries. With no medical supplies available, Adam and Isabel use clothing to bandage Daniel's wounds. That night, Isabel struggles to sleep, worried that Daniel's injury might get infected. However, more than anything, she fears waking up blind. The next morning, even more infected people arrived, and Ken was finally reunited with his wife, Ray. Meanwhile, Willie remained gloomy, worrying about his mother. Adam and Isabel attempted to meet with the guards to report Daniel's injury, hoping to get medical assistance. Unfortunately, the soldiers responded by threatening them with weapons and forcing the couple back to their ward. Sometime later, they received their first food supply, which was of poor quality, similar to prison food, and extremely limited in quantity. Isabel tried using the emergency phone to request additional supplies and a first aid kit, but only an automated assistant responded. Weeks passed, and every day, more people were sent to quarantine. Isabel set up ropes to create boundaries between the wards, and Adam was appointed as the representative for Ward 1. However, maintaining order quickly became impossible. Since everyone was blind, hygiene was neglected, people wandered around naked, and some even relieved themselves wherever they pleased. At one point, Ken tried to comfort Ray by reminiscing about their youth, but she admitted she couldn't bear listening to stories of happier times. One afternoon, Isabel heard a strange noise and discovered a man with an eye patch named Dixon listening to the radio. She convinced him to join Ward 1 and share any news with the other residents who were desperate for information about the outside world. Dixon explained that only a few radio stations were still active, so updates were limited. He reported that there were hundreds of cases of sudden blindness, and the government's only response was to send blind people to quarantine centers while instructing the rest of the population to stay home. The public had watched as experts from around the world gathered at a conference, only to admit that they had no idea what was happening. A few days later, even the experts began to lose their sight, and the illness spread across the country. As people grew restless from staying indoors, they attempted to go outside, leading to soldiers arresting anyone who disobeyed the lockdown orders. The entire city descended into chaos, especially due to continuous traffic accidents, and even airplanes started crashing. Fear took over, forcing people to stay inside, turning every place into a ghost town. The government did nothing, as they too had lost their vision. To end his story, Dixon played a soothing song, bringing a moment of peace to the ward. A few days later, a large group of new arrivals was brought into quarantine. The soldiers displayed their brutality by shooting a man who accidentally stepped out of line. The gunshot triggered mass panic, causing people to push and shove their way inside, even breaking the door in the chaos. As if that weren't enough, the guards refused to remove the body and ordered the ward residents to bury it themselves. At one point, Isabel requested some soup, which the soldiers cruelly threw into the middle of the courtyard. Since she was still pretending to be blind, she had to ask for directions, but instead of helping, the soldiers mocked her, making her wander aimlessly in circles. Meanwhile, Adam, along with several residents from Ward 1, approached Ward 3 to discuss the burial arrangements, as many people had been shot. He also wanted to address an issue. One of the wards had been taking more than their fair share of food. A former bartender named Gregory grew tired of hearing Adam speak like a leader. Declaring himself the king of Ward 3, Gregory's first decree was that everyone should eat as much as they wanted, before considering whether to bury the bodies outside. The scene then shifts to Isabel, who checks on Daniel, who has developed a fever due to a viral infection. She tries to comfort him, but Daniel suddenly threatens her after revealing that he knows she is not blind. Furious, Isabel storms back to her cot, overwhelmed by frustration, while Daniel, unable to endure the pain any longer, attempts to leave, only to be executed by the soldiers. Following Daniel's death, Isabel, consumed with guilt, considers revealing the truth about her sight. However, Adam forbids it, fearing she would be forced into a caretaker role for everyone. Sometime later, Gregory, with the help of an accountant from Ward 3 named David, who had been blind since birth and was thus more adapted to this way of living, discovers the quarantine center's administrative office. Using a loudspeaker, Gregory announces that he is taking control of the facility as his kingdom. His first rule: people must pay with valuable items if they want food. Naturally, this rule is met with outrage, and chaos erupts in the food storage area as people fight for access. Gregory then unveils his secret weapon. He had managed to smuggle a gun into quarantine. Firing a warning shot, he ends the commotion and declares that security will be enforced around the clock, threatening to shoot anyone who attempts to steal. Some consider resisting, but challenging an armed man is far too dangerous. Isabel begins collecting valuables from her ward's residents, gathering wedding rings, small trinkets, and anything they have left. In the process, she discovers a pair of scissors that India has secretly kept for herself. Meanwhile, Willie has nothing to offer, but India generously steps in as his guardian and pays for his food. At the storage area, David uses his experience to assess the value of each item by touch. However, Gregory is indifferent to their worth. He gives out only a few boxes of food per ward and threatens to kill anyone who dares to complain. The residents have no choice but to ration tiny portions of food that are barely enough for a single person. Feeling like a failure as a leader, Adam withdraws from the group. Later, India finds him and offers comfort, assuring him that his decision to yield was the right one, as it prevented an all-out war. Their conversation leads to intimacy, and the two end up making love. Not long after, Isabel witnesses this. Instead of reacting with anger, she calmly tells Adam and India that she understands, and that there is no need to lie to her because she is not blind. She then asks India to keep her secret. A week later, everyone was running out of food. Knowing that the residents no longer had valuables to trade, Gregory announced that they could now pay for food with women. Isabel tried to leave and ask the soldiers for new supplies, but they explained that they had already given out everything. Food distribution was now entirely in the hands of the quarantine residents. A discussion began in Ward 1 about how to proceed. Adam insisted that no one should be forced. If someone wanted to volunteer, it had to be their own choice without pressure from others. After much contemplation, a woman named Catherine agreed to follow Ward 3's new rule, which inspired other women, including Isabel, India, and Ray. Although Ken forbade her, Ray had already made up her mind and went anyway. Sometime later, David arrived to escort the women to the food storage area, where they endured what was likely the worst night of their lives. The men of Ward 3 were cruel and brutal. One of them treated a woman so violently that she did not survive. The next morning, Isabel asked someone to retrieve the food, as the women had returned with the body of the deceased resident, determined to clean and give her a proper burial. That same day, David visited Ward 2 to seek more volunteers. He even boldly entered Ward 1 to congratulate them on their efforts, despite knowing that one of the women had died. The men of Ward 3 were unaware of this fact, until Isabel coldly revealed it, leaving David speechless. Without realizing it, David's arrogance fueled Isabel's rage. Gripping the hidden scissors, she stormed into the storage room while everyone's attention was on the women from Ward 2. Without hesitation, Isabel killed Gregory, then quickly pulled the women out with her, deceiving a panicked David so that his gunshots missed. Once outside, Isabel made a new rule. If food was not distributed fairly, there would be more deaths in Ward 3 every day. Terrified, Ward 3 barricaded themselves inside the storage area. Meanwhile, Ward 1 prepared to take the food by force. As they strategized, Catherine slipped away from the group. At the same time, Isabel finally admitted that she was not blind. It turned out that Catherine had a lighter. She sneaked into Ward 3 and set it on fire. The flames spread rapidly, trapping the residents inside and killing them before the chaos could escalate any further. Isabel then led everyone out of the quarantine facility. To their astonishment, no one fired at them. The guards were no longer at their posts. Even more shocking, the main gate was unlocked. This could only mean one thing: they were free. Adam, Isabel, Willie, Dixon, India, Ken, Ray, and a young black man decided to stay together and walk toward the city. Once there, they discovered that the government had collapsed and the city had become an abandoned wasteland. The few remaining survivors attacked one another at the mere scent of food, and some animals had begun feeding on human corpses. Unfortunately, without realizing it, the young black man became separated from the group. Sometime later, Adam and Isabel left the others at a bar and headed to the shopping district to search for a supermarket. There, people were desperately fighting over the last remaining food on the shelves. However, since Isabel could still see, she managed to find a staircase leading to a storage room while Adam guarded their clothes. After gathering supplies, Isabel attempted to leave, but the rustling of plastic and the scent of food on her breath quickly gave her away. The crowd immediately turned on her, forcing her to flee. Once it was safe, Isabel rested to calm herself while Adam returned to the supermarket to retrieve the clothes they had dropped during their escape. A stray dog approached Isabel, seemingly friendly and seeking companionship. Suddenly, a heavy downpour began, prompting Isabel and the dog to take shelter inside a church. The place was packed with people, and all the statues had their eyes covered. Yet a priest continued to preach the word of God. Outside, people took advantage of the rain to collect water and cleanse themselves, as they had long been without clean water. Adam eventually returned with their clothes and picked up Isabel. Together, they reunited with the group, now accompanied by their new canine companion. That night, the group ate from their limited supplies and decided to rest in the bar before continuing their journey the next morning. At dawn, they carefully navigated the ruined city, heading toward Adam and Isabel's home. The couple gladly offered their house as a shared refuge. From that moment on, they built a new routine. Under Isabel's guidance, they cleaned, shared clothes, and only ventured outside when necessary to search for food. They collected rainwater and washed whenever it rained. At one point, Dixon expressed his wish to stay with them forever, saying that, to him, this felt like a real family. Ray and Ken rekindled their bond, reminiscing about their youth. Adam and Isabel also grew closer again, their love reigniting. Weeks passed. One morning, as everyone was preparing breakfast, Ken suddenly exclaimed he could see again. The group erupted in celebration, realizing that their bodies were overcoming the illness. The blindness had only been temporary. This discovery brought a newfound hope for the future of humanity. One remarkable aspect of this film is that none of the characters have names, yet they can communicate effectively without ever mentioning them. Any names used in this narrative are solely for easier character identification. As for the cause of the blindness and why it eventually healed, well, this is similar to Don't Look Up, meaning there's no need to overanalyze the explanation. However, the theory presented by the doctor, whom I decided to call Adam, could provide some insight. He suggests that the condition might resemble amaurosis, except instead of seeing blackness, everything appears white. He also considers the possibility of it being neurological, perhaps a form of agnosia, which is the inability to recognize objects that should be familiar. At its core, this film explores human behavior under sudden pressure and forced adaptation. It questions how long people will hold onto their principles when circumstances push them to abandon those very beliefs. The result? Well, as we see in the film, even in the face of blindness and uncertainty, some humans quickly reveal their animalistic nature. Ward 3 hoards food, demanding jewelry and valuables from wards 1 and 2 as payment for survival, despite the fact that such objects hold no real value in their situation. Another scene contrasts two dogs, one scavenging human corpses out of hunger, while another ignores the corpses entirely, still perceiving humans as friends rather than food. This dog could symbolize people who remain steadfast in their morals, even in dire circumstances. Or perhaps the film is suggesting that in some ways, a dog may be morally superior to humans who surrender to their primal instincts. Then there's the government's response, treating the infected like rabid animals. Rather than providing them with proper medical care, they lock them away in an asylum, forcing them to fend for themselves. Out of sheer fear, the soldiers even resort to firing warning shots, despite knowing that none of the quarantined individuals can see. What these people needed was humane treatment and medical assistance, but instead of focusing on their well-being, the government was more interested in discussing potential cures and the cost of research, despite having no real understanding of what white sickness even was. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.